Hello, my name is Madeleine Tully, and for my research project, I focused on Gothic cathedrals and their groundbreaking introduction of new construction design, art, and a new perspective surrounding religion in European society. I also explore the importance of stained glass artwork found throughout Gothic cathedral design and its relevance in incorporating new symbolism for light. I think when most look at a Gothic cathedral, we think they are very massive, gaudy like stone structures that are really just overwhelming compared to the buildings and structures that surround them. The top right-hand corner, we see the Italian cathedral Duomo of Milan and its astonishing size compared to the buildings that circle it. On the left, we can see the Amiens Cathedral of France. And these buildings have absolutely beautiful and intricate stone carvings and sculptures, high pointed arches, and probably one of the most famous features of them are these carefully crafted stained glass windows. And while a lot of the focus of these massive cathedrals can be directed towards the outside architecture, it's important to note that the interior of these buildings hold just as much importance and beauty. Probably one of the most famous Gothic cathedrals is the Notre Dame Cathedral of Paris in France, which is the set of the famous Hunchback of Notre Dame story, an animated Disney film. This movie does an exceptional job in its depiction of Gothic cathedrals and really the idea behind this new religious experience that was meant to be had. If somebody asked if there was an image that perfectly captures the intention behind the Gothic architecture, it would most certainly be this very scene of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, where Esmeralda is looking up at this stunning rose stained glass window as the light comes through. In this scene, she has taken up refuge in the cathedral after Frollo has once again tried to capture her. She roams the darkened church with others, singing and calling out to God for his protection, his love, and his guidance. And finally, she walks up to this stained glass window as the light is shining down on her, appearing almost as if a bridge between heaven and earth. This experience that Esmeralda is having is exactly what was in mind during the construction of the Gothic cathedral. Gothic style focused on creating this upward orientation where the interior of the cathedrals were dark and almost cold, but there was always a light that was being welcomed in. This amazing relationship between structure, appearance, and symbolism is what truly allowed for Gothic cathedrals to stand out from other forms of religious architecture. To really understand the drastic change in style that the Gothic era provided, it's important to know about the style architecture that preceded it, which was Romanesque. Romanesque was the religious style of architecture that was found throughout Europe in the 11th and 12th century. This style of architecture has many aspects of Roman architecture to it, hence its name Romanesque. Some of the main aspects of Romanesque architecture were its rounded arches, tiered construction, pilasters, usage of ancient columns, and many others that were dependent on the location of construction. In the upper left-hand corner is the Cathedral of Pisa, and in the zoomed-in picture in the corner of this cathedral, you can see the usage of those columns. And when you look at the very bottom, you can see the rounded arches that make their way all around the building. In the picture of the Notre Dame de Grand Church of Poitiers, France, in the bottom left-hand corner, it's very obvious how prominent the usage of these rounded arches were found in Romanesque architecture. Now, in essentially a 180-degree turnaround from the rounded arches, we see an immense use of pointed arches in Gothic architecture. Along with the pointed arches, ribbed vault ceilings, flying buttresses, stained glass, and stone sculpture were many of the attributes found in Gothic era architecture. And what is so important about these pointed arches and flying buttresses is that they are essential in allowing for Gothic cathedrals to stand as tall and towering as they are. The focus of upward orientation that Gothic cathedrals create is only possible with cathedrals themselves to be extraordinarily tall. The invention of the flying buttress are what allowed for architectures to shift the need of walls being the main form of support for the building and allow for more focus, creating the heaven-like experience by installing massive stained glass windows. These buttresses are what were used as support for the building and crucial to this new style of architecture. The man who can be seen as the father of Gothic cathedrals is a man named Abbot Suger, who lived from 1081 to 1151 and was the advisor of King Louis VI and Louis VII. Suger was responsible for the reconstruction of the Abbey Church of Saint Denis, which was a little ways north of Paris. And this reconstruction of the church, which was completed in 1144, that can be seen as the very first Gothic building in Europe. Suger's main focus in this reconstruction of this church was the idea of luminosity. Suger can be quoted famously saying, "A dull mind rises to truth through that which is material, and in seeing this light is resurrected from his former submersion." As France being the birthplace of Gothic cathedrals, it quickly spread throughout the country after the construction of the Abbey Church of Saint Denis. The middle 12th century saw cathedrals such as Noyon and Notre Dame begin to express new Gothic style, and by the turn of the 13th century, Gothic cathedral architecture had reached its full maturity. The Gothic style first spread to England, which could be seen in the Lincoln Westminster Abbey and the Canterbury, and then continued to spread to Germany, Spain, Italy, until it was vastly found all over much of Western Europe. One of the most interesting things about Gothic architecture is why it was given the name Gothic. The Gothic era was named during the Renaissance by critics of the style. It was thought of as gaudy and lacking conformity. The name was not at all a compliment to the style of the architecture and essentially was a backhanded critique of it. The Italians of the Renaissance that coined the term Gothic believed it was barbaric and associated it with the Goths, which were a group of people from Germany during the medieval ages, which is ironic because we know that the Gothic era did not originate from Germany, nor did it reach Germany until a while after the birth of the first Gothic church. Another important thing to know to fully understand the impact that Gothic cathedrals had is understanding the society that existed when these cathedrals were built. So during the High Middle Ages, which is thought to be between 1100 and 1300, society was structured by feudalism. Medieval society could be best described as the shape of a pyramid where you had religious figures and political figures at the top, and as you made your way down to the bottom, you had common people such as peasants, craftsmen, and merchants. Now, majority of the time, these towns that the cathedrals were built in did not have things like town halls or common meeting places to conduct government, and so the cathedral really served as not only a place of worship, but also as a community center. Their size and scale was large enough to accommodate everybody at the same time. So you frequently saw the cathedral being used for not only religious worship, but also markets, civic meetings, festivals, holidays, and political dealings. And what is so fascinating about this is when you think of other ancient societies such as ancient Egypt and Greece, almost all the time religious buildings were to be used only by religious leaders, and common people essentially had no access to them, which is something that we don't see at all when it comes to Gothic cathedrals. It was intended that a political or religious figure could worship side by side with a peasant. Another important thing to keep in mind when discussing society during this time was that majority of people were unable to read. The stained glass windows found throughout these cathedrals served as a teaching tool for those who were illiterate. The stained glass work featured various biblical scenes such as Madonna and Child, the birth of Jesus, and also the crucifixion of Jesus. Theory of Chartist family said, paintings in the church are writings for the instructions of those who cannot read. But it wasn't only religious artwork that was found in these stained glass windows, but also scenes from everyday life. Flowers, animals, common people, and their tasks were all subjects that were depicted in these glass artworks. Now, thinking back to the scene with Esmeralda as she looks up at the Notre Dame rose window, we can really understand the image that Abbot Suger had when creating the new Gothic style. Out of all the new architecture designs that came out of Gothic era, stained glass was the one out of all of them that helped create this vision of lux lucent in tenebris, light shines in darkness. We learned earlier that these glass artworks served as a teaching tool for those when worshiping, but its real job was to create a completely new religious experience that had seemingly never been felt before. These glass windows were strategically placed throughout the cathedral so that when light struck them, the images and colors they depicted were intensified for the viewer. It's in that instance that the worshiper was essentially able to cross over from the material world to the world in which God resided in, heaven. This feeling is also exaggerated by the fact that glasswork would almost never be at exactly eye level and always residing at the uppermost part of the cathedral. Of course, in modern day, Gothic architecture is really a thing of the past, but we can see some aspects, specifically the stained glass artwork that was able to be adopted in not only other structures, but also other religious buildings. Probably one of my favorite modern stained glass artwork is that of the Pepperdine University Chapel, and it is absolutely breathtaking. And though it slightly differs stylistically than that of cathedrals like Notre Dame and Saint Denis, it still creates the same feeling from the use of light and truly is a bridge between our world and God's.